Hello and welcome to our monthly Pictas Academy event. We have a great webinar this evening, but we're not going to start just yet. We're just going to ask you, as everyone's joining, that you put where you're from in the chat box so we can see where you're all from. I'm going to open the chat box because I haven't looked at it yet. So I'm in the UK at the minute. Martin, where are you?
I'm from Germany.
You're in Germany.
In the Black Forest, yeah.
Oh, the Black Forest, gorgeous. So we've got people from Canada and the USA coming in at the minute. We're just going to wait for a few people to come in before we start the actual webinar. So anybody that's dropped in between, if you can let us know where you're from. California until next week, and then is that Washington, WA? Hi, Matteo. Hi, Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea. Okay, so I'll just tell you a little bit about Pictus. Pictus is a multicultural community of photographers, artists and creators, and it's our mission to help people learn and grow and develop their skills. So we have a membership, and you can join us if you wish on the membership. Maybe Matteo, because Matteo's online, he could drop the link to our website. And oh, we've got Alberta as well. Stephen's in Alberta, so that's great. And oh, Uganda. Wow. Thanks, Matteo. So yeah, you can get more info at pictus.net about the membership and about what we aspire to and what we're doing. A little bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions, please could you type them into the chat box, rather than the question and answer box, actually, not the chat box. So we've got a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If you could put your questions in there, we will actually then answer the questions at the end of the webinar, and we can also open the mic for you to ask Martin directly the questions that you might have. Okay, so we've got a great subject this evening. It's all about colour. It's a very emotive subject because it can make you feel joy or it can make you feel sad. And Martin's our expert on this, and he's going to be the presenter this evening, and he will be talking to you about 7 colour contrasts, I think, in the work of Johannes Itten. So I'm really looking forward to this because I really enjoy colour, and I know Johannes Itten. Well, I've got the book. I've got his book. So welcome, Martin. I'm going to hand over to you to carry on with the webinar.
Okay. I will go to my presentation and I will share this to you. So, hi, I'm Martin. I'm sitting in Black Forest, Germany, and today I'm your host for this presentation. It's about Johannes Itten and his teachings of the 7 color contrasts. Here on the left side of the first slide, you see Johannes Itten, a picture of him during his years in the Bauhaus area in the Weimar Republic. I think this is about, was taken 1920. We can do that in the next slide when I go to some biographical facts. Here on the right side, you see his interpretation of a color circle or a color sphere. You could actually take this star shape form and cut these pieces out, glue them together, and you get a little ball of color with white on top, black on the bottom. And if you put access to them, you have always the complementary color contrast. So it's a very neat little trick he does there. If you fold it out, you have an image like this one here, and in the bottom. There are 7 shades and 12 tones. You have the 3 primary colors like yellow, red, and blue or cyan here. And you have all the secondary and tertiary colors here as well. As I stated before, I will go on for some small biographical facts, if this is working. Yes, it is. A few Itten facts, just for context. He was born on the 11th of November in 1888, which is a very neat date to be born on. He died on the 25th of March 1967. He was part of the core Bauhaus, invited by Walter Gropius, and he worked there as a teacher for 4 years, from 1919 to 1923. Then there was a little dispute, between Itten and Walter Gropius about how art should be taught. So Itten decided to found his own art school after that. And a few years later, when the NSDAP rose in Germany and Nazi Germany occurred, then Itten was one of the artists who was purged and part of the infamous Degenerate Art exhibition by the NSDAP to humiliate modern artists. And most of them fled the country for good reasons. Itten himself, he flew first to the Netherlands, then back to his home country, Switzerland, where he was teaching art and color theory and painting in Zurich up to his, basically to his end. He has a late book, which Nikki pointed to before. It's called The Art of Color. It was first printed in 1961. It is still seen as a key work for color theory, as I state here. And it was something like the main summary of the work of the Itten's teachings. And you can still purchase it today, but it's somehow expensive. It costs around 200 to 300 euros, depends on the printing date, or but you can find it on the market if you are interested in it. As an example for Itten as an artist, I took this painting here. It's still in his younger years. You can see his influence by Cubism here, these cubistic forms he used. And all the 7 color contrasts he was teaching can be found in this painting. So this is just for context. You have just an example, an image of who Itten were as an artist and as a teacher. Before we go into the color contrast itself, there are different color models out there. Basically, they are the same, but with a slightly different approach. Itten himself, the star, as you saw on the first slide, it was based on the teachings of Hölzel. Hölzel was a teacher of Itten, and he just took the theory of his teacher and made them his own. You have the Complementary color cycle here, a circle. This was roughly the same time period, and it's basically based on the same principles as the color circle of Itten. Most likely you will encounter this one. This is, I think, from Küppers. It's usually taught in every art school, in every art course in the world. What you have here very clearly, you see the 3 primary colors. It's yellow, blue, and red. If you're in the printing world, you have yellow, cyan, and magenta. And if you mix these together, you get green, orange, and violet, and so on. So these are the primary, secondary, and tertiary colors, and you can go on levels on outward, and you get more and more nuances of colors. A more, I would say, modern approach is a model here. It's it lays a more focus of the surroundings and of the surrounding influence of a color to the other colors. It's only based on the primary and secondary colors. But yeah, this is like a model. If you want to know how a color influences another color, this is a good model, and you can always go back to this one. If you're a painter, you will be more likely working with this concept here, or with one of the above. If you are a photographer, you will most likely more or less use this one as a sheet on the side, just as a reminder, and to see what colors are influencing other colors. Before we get to the contrast itself, I will talk a little bit about the weight of color, because this is an important topic, and usually it is yeah, a little washed, or yeah, washed away, brushed under the rug. The weighting of color. Colors in pictures have certain kinds of weight. Darker colors have less weight, brighter colors have more weight. This is very important to balance a picture out if you use colors. But even if you use a monochrome picture, if you think you put 1% more black into a monochrome picture, it doesn't really do anything about the darkness of the picture. The picture is not visibly darker if you put 1% more black in it. But if you put 1% more white in it, it will be visibly brighter. So the bright colors have more weight to the darker colors. This might feel counterintuitive at first, but if you think about it, if you fall back on the monochrome side, this makes a lot more sense. So if you don't know how to handle colors, always go back on the black and white on the monochrome approach. And if it works there, then you can add colors, because white is usually called the absence of colors, and black is usually called all colors together. So you can always fall back to the monochrome approach. The first color contrast I would want to talk about is as a pure color-to-color contrast. It's the use of primary colors in the same picture. The primary colors, as I stated before, are red, blue, yellow, or if you're on the printing side, magenta, cyan, and yellow. This is sometimes combined with green. Even though green is a secondary and not a primary color, it feels like a fourth primary color, because if you go outside, if you go into nature, there's so much green surrounding us. So green has a lot more, has a feel of a fourth primary color, even though it's not. This contrast feels loud, it feels strong. What I said before with the weighting of colors, if you look at these small squares here, just feel that the red color is slightly smaller than the yellow one, but it isn't. They are exactly the same, but the weighting of the color makes it appear a different size. And you will see that in the course of this presentation once more later on. The pure color contrast is basically often used in advertising. It's frequently used for you photographers out there for flower or fashion pictures. These usually you want to have bright and clear colors, and the primary colors are those colors. You can look at is Matisse, Miro, Kandinsky, very famous. And in this case here is Franz Marc. In this painting, I point to two things which are very helpful if you want to balance out or structure an image or a painting. Is first one, you have clamping corners. like they're cornering it out, and they give the picture a lot of stability. And what you do is you use a dark corner and the dark corner and put them on the opposite side, and then the picture will automatically get stability. The second thing I want to point out here is the use of this primary pure color to color contrast that Franz Marc is doing here. He puts this yellow, bright yellow color, and he uses this small blue tone here. And this one is very important in this painting because it gives the painting structure. If you edit this out, the painting will begin to fall apart. But with the use of this blue tone here, it pushes everything back, and you get a lot of spatial depth here. You get a lot of structure in the painting. And as you can see, this tongue and this small triangle shape here, these are the only blue tones in the bottom, and you have a little violet tones here in the upper right corner. But other than that, he uses green, red, and yellow. So the primary colors plus green. And this blue tone is very important, very neat trick. If you have an image, you put a colorful object or something like that in front, just a little overlapping. It gives you really a lot of spatial depth and really makes everything three-dimensional. So that's a very neat trick you can use. The second contrast I will talk about is the light and dark contrast. It's usually as grayscale based or grayscale with a color-based contrast. It's sometimes rarely combined with pure primary colors, which works perfectly, but don't overdo it. Don't use the primary colors you see in the first one too much when you use or put a focus on the light and dark contrast. This one feels always dramatic, mystic, melancholic, which you will see on the next slide. I have chosen here two paintings, one from Rembrandt at the top, The Night Watch, and one from Switzerland artist called Füssli at the bottom. This is called Nightmare. They were experts in using light and dark, and it's often used for atmosphere. As an example, very easily for photographers out there, candlelight always gives you a great atmosphere. As I stated before, it always get this mystical feeling, maybe melancholic feeling. It creates a lot of spatial depth. It creates a lot of tension. And it's very good to use this kind of contrast for interior or objects or portraits. And artists to look at: Rembrandt, Füssli, Caravaggio, or Francisco de Goya. If you have the chance, you have the idea to go to a museum, and they have one of those great old artists, so these great old masters have a painting out there. Take a good look at them and then go close to them, because you see how they use colors, how they use lighting, how they use dark and lighter objects or persons or costumes to create all these things I talked about it right now. The third one is a little more complicated than the first and the second. It's a complementary color contrast. This one results in a primary color meets the opposite secondary, or if you go levels ahead, tertiary colors. In this example here, you see the magenta and the green used as a complementary color contrast. Take a look at these small squares here. They have the same size and they appear the same size, in contrast to the first one I showed you. We have here red and green, which are weighted equally, which you can see here, or magenta. You have blue cyan, orange, which is 1/3 orange, 2/3 blue, and you have the yellow violet, which is 1/4 to 3/4. This is a contrast which really feels crashing, as you can see here. It's almost flickering, and it's a very blazing contrast. If you want to go all in, go for this contrast. It's very placative, you would say, in Germany. I choose these two paintings, and I tell you why. Usually in art, a complementary color contrast is used for showing differences or conflicts. And there are two things you have to keep in mind. If they have the same brightness, especially the same brightness to the surroundings, they become equiluminant. That means the contour is lost, which you can see here in the upper painting in the lower left corner, and you can see here in the lower right corner. The contour is almost lost, and it starts to fizzle out. In comparison to this very sharp blue-orange, where these colors crash together. And in this one, this from Gauguin, it's called Two Women, maybe mother and daughter. Here it's used to show a conflict of age, maybe an inner conflict. This person here is very closed up. This is halfway open, but also closed up to the viewer. So here's a lot of tension, a lot of conflict, and a lot of differences. This older woman compared to this younger woman. In the lower painting here, this from Jan van Eyck, it's a painting of a marriage couple of a salesman with his wife, with his pregnant wife. He uses the red and green complementary contrast, which I stated before, they have roughly the same weight. So he used it in this case, this shape of green here has the same size of the shapes of red here in the background. So this is weighted. And what he did in this painting is he mixed, as told you what I say here, mixing these colors results in a destruction, like in a gray, muddy, brownish color. And he did exactly that. He mixed this red and green tones to paint this brown costume of the male figurine here in this painting. And another interesting thing here in this painting is he has only a dark edge on the top, but not on the bottom. So he doesn't clamp it in to give it a more stable feeling. So he left this corner very, very, very bright in comparison to the very dark ceiling here in this room. And what this does, imagine this window wasn't there, it was a dark wall. And imagine this corner here, it wasn't there, it was only dark. This figurine would appear like a ghost, like a floating hand, which almost does, and a floating face here on this side. And so the picture, it would tilt on this side because this one would be bright and this one would be dark, and then the picture is out of balance. Always keep the balance thing in mind. It's one of the most important things if you want to create good pictures. I think in photography even more than in painting, because in painting you can always do some neat little tricks, and maybe you can in photography too. I'm not an expert, but when you capture just a moment, keep this in mind, that the balance is always, this is maybe the most important things, and at least have maybe if you can crop a picture, you can be not so focused on the balance. But other than that, always keep an eye to the balance of the picture. The fourth one is a cold warm contrast. This is maybe self-explanatory. Usually it's from red orange tones, which are usually felt warm, and combined with blue green tones, which are usually felt cold. Sometimes it's combined with white, especially in winter pictures. This one feels easily emotional, sentimental, and we can easily feel why. Take a look at these two squares here. You can see that the orange square appear a little bit bigger than the blue square. This is also part of the weighting thing I talked so much already. It's usually used in seaside pictures like sunsets, sundown, winter landscapes, and it's used to create emotions. As you can see in this painting by Monet, a great use of warm colors in the middle, and the cold, slightly cold here for creating this water and sky. But it feels very warm because you have this center of red and yellow, orange colors which are floating through. You can almost feel the evening or the morning sun, I don't know which. In the bottom one, you have this cold feeling, even though this figurine is red almost exclusively, which is almost a pure color red here. So primary color red here. The most of the painting is kept in cold colors, like these white, gray, bluish colors, and only this figurine and a little bit of the floor is put in this warmer, more heartwarming colors, and so it is balanced out here perfectly, nearly perfectly from Paul Cézanne. Other artists to look at is Renoir or Caspar David Friedrich, which from my perspective has sometimes a little overdone it, but so is it. The next two are quality and quantity color contrast. These one are a little more tricky than the other ones. Basically, you put a pure color, a primary color against a dull color of the same color family. So you have this red and this red. You have this dull red, this little darker wine red here, and the bright red here in the middle. If you look closely, if you use this contrast, this unsharpens all the edges here and here. And that's the first thing you have to be careful about it. It unsharpens the edges if you use this quality contrast. If you are in the same color family and you use this contrast, be a little careful because it blurs out all the edges. The second thing you have to be careful with quality color contrast is when you combine this with black or white. So you put black or white side by side, which you can see here and you can feel here a little. Both black and white, they greatly influence the quality of colors. And so the color can appear a different way that you intended to. So just have an eye for that. And it can feel a little gimmicky because, as we can see on the next slide, it's often used as an effect. It's often used to create vintage and retro images because it feels very 60s, early 70s. And that's where a lot of artists use this quality contrast. In the top, you see a picture of Albers. In the bottom, you see a picture of Victor Vasarely, who was very famous for his contrast pictures. He was also, I think, a friend of Itten. They at least knew each other very well. And Vasarely took the teachings of Itten and made it them himself to put it on a different level in his own works. So this is the quality contrast. As I said, ideal uses for vintage or retro images. And you can easily see why it always feels 60s, 70s, at least for me. The next one is the quantity color contrast. It is, it's different, but same. Here you have the contrast through proportion and through weighting. As you can see, if you took the same colors and just play around with the proportion, it gives a different feel for the image itself. This is great for emphasizing importance or to marginalize objects or people in your image. Keep in mind, you always have an underlying message. If you work with colors, if you work with contrasts, then there's always this feel which everybody has, but maybe can't really put the finger on it. Think of it as everyone can go into the kitchen and prepare a meal, but it doesn't make you a chef. You know what tastes good or bad, but you can't really tell why. You just know, you feel into it. And most likely you did all these contrast things by instinct before, but it's better to know about it. And if you know about it, you can use those contrasts like a tool, and you can very precise influence how your image works when you use colors in your image. This is also great to enhance perspective. Another way instead of the using of the dark and light contrast. I choose this Van Gogh's Starry Night as an example to explain this contrast, because this is a painting that doesn't feel dark, but it's roughly dominated by dark and blue tones, almost black tones here. It's a lot of dark, a lot of blue tones here, which usually makes a picture or painting very, very dark. But he uses this small little yellow points here, stars. He uses these reflections in the water with this bright yellow, bright orange. And he uses even some points of green here in the front, which are also very, very light. And you can see this painting here is perfectly weighted, even though the dominant color, way dominant color, is blue or almost black. But it doesn't feel dark or out of balance because of that. One little small detail here, these two small appearing people in the front, they appear small, but if you measure it out, they make a fifth to a quarter of the height of the whole painting. So when you use this quantity color contrast, you can use it to marginalize things and to put things in perspective. It's always, for example, when you have the chance to have a landscape photograph or a landscape painting, always put something in there to give them a little perspective. And be it a little neat bush or something like that, or a person, to put things in perspective, and you create a lot of depth into the picture. Of course, you can do it without, but it really helps the viewer when he has something to look at, when he roughly knows the size of this, and then it puts everything in perspective. Like here, Van Gogh, masterly done. The seventh and last of those contrasts that Itten were teaching is the simultaneous color contrast. This one is different from the others because it goes from the same color will appear different when put against different colors. So this gray here appears to be a little, darker than this gray here and the surroundings here, because those influence one another. The white surroundings and the colors here inside. If you invert this one, then the eye and the brain doesn't need trick. And if you have a green square like this, and you have a gray square in this, the brain tries to tint this one slightly red, and the other way around. It doesn't appear so on the monitor for real, but if you have in the on a paper or in a book, you will really clearly see this effect. This can be used in a very smart way to use the surroundings or the background to influence the color you use in your picture. And this is also great for using gray. If you have people have a gray costume, or you have a gray wall and you put colors against it, then you can greatly do great effects with this. These also influence the size, the appearing size of objects, depending on what color you set on the side. This can help to create optical illusions if you want to, but it can feel a little artsy. It can feel a little overdone, and it can easily be overdone. And then the whole thing begins to flicker. So be careful with that. If you use this simultaneous color contrast in the top painting from Seurat, you see this man standing here, and he's this color right here is roughly the same as the color of the trousers here in the front. But how he uses light and dark surroundings changes the appeal of the color itself. Seurat is especially interesting to look at when you have the chance to, because he invented a technique is called pointillismus. And if you get close to this paintings from Seurat, you can see there are only little small dots, one after another, and they create the whole painting. And very rarely he uses a lot of colors. He uses maybe 6 to 8 different shades of color, and the other colors, they exist only by the simultaneous color contrast, because he's a master with exactly what this does in our brain. So it's basically an optical illusion. And in this more modern painting from a German painter called Albers, I think he is German, you can see this also in full effect. These red squares here, these objects here in the front, this row, this ladder, this is always the same red tone, but it doesn't appear this way. He lets it fall out here because he overlays it with this yellow, but on the sides, this is the same red. And once again, if you have sit on a monitor, it doesn't look that way. But if you see those paintings or those pictures in person, you will clearly see that this is just an optical illusion, even though you think it is not. This is the same color here all around. And the last one, it's like a bonus, is the so-called excessive contrast. And this is an effect that is totally, it only takes effect, it only takes place in our brain. And when we're staring at a color, at a specific color for a longer period of time, especially when it is a primary color or a secondary color, so it is really close to the center of the color wheel or of the color sphere, the brain itself creates a complementary visual echo on the retina. And this is a biological and a physical optical illusion, and this can create pseudo hallucinations because you see a shape somewhere where it isn't, if you stare long enough at a color. And also this is the reason why surgery sheets are green, because if they were white, the blood red would create this effect, and the doctor would not be able to do his surgery anymore because he sees different shapes that weren't there. So the surgery sheets are green because the blood red doesn't appear red if you put them on green, which is a thing I didn't know before I did this presentation, but I thought it was a very, very nice information to have, even for a Saturday matinee or something like that. Yeah, you can throw a little knowledge in there. Despite Itten knowing about this effect, it's known from the Renaissance time, I think. He did not include it in his teachings because this is created by the viewer, in the brain of the viewer, and not by the artist. And Itten saw himself as an artist in his teachings, and he taught art and how to create art. And yeah, even though it is a point of color theory, and it's very important to know. So this was my presentation, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Martin. That was so informative, and I do have the book here, so I'm going to show everybody what it looks like. Hopefully, can anyone see that? No, that's well, I've typed it into the chat, so it was much more interesting listening to you than reading the book, so thank you for that. And
thanks a lot.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah.
It was great. And learning about the 7 color contrasts, so I hope everybody's really enjoyed that. I also want to say how amazing it was that you were teaching that in a second language. I think that was amazing, so thank you. So has anybody got any questions? Because if you raise your hand, we can open the mic and you can talk directly to Martin and he can answer your questions for you. I think you've got an easy get out there. I don't think you've got any questions, which is absolutely brilliant.
Yes,
so
I think so too. If there would some questions appear, you can drop it in the Discord maybe, or you can just write to me
or if anybody
on LinkedIn or something like that. Yeah.
Or if anybody on Vero, it can go onto the Academy chat.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Martin. That was absolutely brilliant. I'm sure everybody's had a really great time learning about the color contrasts.
Went way better than I had trained. Yeah. Thank you too for the opportunity.
It's our pleasure.
So, yes.
Okay, bye everyone. I think one of the guys might be on the techie side of this. whilst I'm chatting to you. I think they might turn it off. So thanks everyone. We will see you in a month. Take care.